Hey, what's up, GRE lovers? Today, what we're gonna do is we're gonna look into the three what's method and have a deeper dive into this method and how it kind of like works and what are the major components that one needs to take into consideration in order to make it work effectively. But before I actually dive into this three what's method, I have to say one thing that this video is probably going to be a bit longer than my usual videos are, so please bear with me. I promise you that at the end, everything is just going to make sense and it's going to be worth it. So, if you haven't seen my the three what method video, so you probably need to check it again. Don't worry, I'll share a link in the description or probably in the comments. So the problem that I faced while teaching this method is I kind of like asked one of my students during the class that, hey, can you actually apply this method? And it was really working for me. However, when I asked one of my students, they were not able to apply that effectively. So I kind of like started asking questions that what is really that you're missing? And I quickly realized that there was some lack in foundation or the prerequisite that this method basically demands for or asks for. Like, for example, the three what method is basically about the major ideas, and the major ideas or the beef or the core ideas are basically in the independent clauses. And independent clauses, you have a subject, a verb, probably some type of state, and I quickly realized that people were facing problem in identifying what is an independent clause. They were not able to differentiate between a relative clause, dependent clause, and independent clause. Some were even facing facing some trouble in identifying the right form of verb. They were kind of like mixing it up with infinitive and gerund. So I thought that, hey man, I really need to kind of like dive deeper into this method and kind of like describe my thought process overall. So just a quick overview of the three what method. For example, let's say the first what is basically what are you talking about, and this is mostly the subject of consideration. And the second what is basically about hey, what about it, what specifics are you trying to tell me about the subject. That is mostly a verb, sometimes a static state, which is mostly adjective or something to this effect. And finally, it has a point into it. So the reason why independent clauses are so important is, first of all, dependent clauses basically do not have a point. The main point or a complete thought is not clear. So if I come back to this method, let me go through an example. If I say, let's say Cristiano Ronaldo is the best player in the world. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about Cristiano Ronaldo, the subject. What about him? The fact that he is the best player. That is a state. He is the best player. And what is the point basically? The point is basically probably a compliment that I'm trying to praise, a CR7. I can also shift to a verb and I can say Cristiano Ronaldo is still scoring the most goals in the Italian league. Now, what am I talking about? I'm talking about Cristiano Ronaldo, the subject. What about him? The fact that he is scoring the most goals. Now, this time it's dynamic. It's a verb. It's changing. And what is the point? Obviously, the point is, again, a compliment. So this is a quick overview of what is a three what's method. And before I dive into this, I need to actually highlight this crazy diagram in which I have basically described what are the prerequisites I demand from you guys if you want to apply this three what's method effectively. So the first one over here is a CTN. I call it canceling the noise. So the canceling is the noise is basically about the major ideas and ignoring the details, and the major ideas are always in the independent clauses where there are subjects and verbs. I kind of like expect you to know different type of clauses. I expect you to know how to locate a subject. I expect you to locate a verb, that kind of thing. Don't worry if you're not able to get it right now. We will be doing some examples later on, so don't freak out yet. What is SA? So SA is basically structural analysis, and this is kind of like your sense of the sense of order in literature. Like words follow a certain order in order to make sense, which almost some grammarian uses syntax or structure and other kind of stuff. But for a layman or simple student who just wants to prepare for the GRE, I think the word order sounds a bit more, convincing and easy to comprehend. In structural analysis, we are really interested in the order of the words and how they appear and how they make sense. In CA, the contextual analysis, we are basically interested in the semantics, in the meanings, and this is the part where a lot of vocabulary plays a huge role. You need to actually know the meaning of certain clues, which will actually give you the information to take the guess. And finally, you need to know a little bit about logic, how deductive reasoning works, how inductive reasoning works, what are the flaws related to deductive, what are the flaws related to inductive, the fact that deductive, considers certainty, whereas inductive, considers only probability. It's just a likelihood. So these are like the 4 things that you need to consider and apply them to the text to come up with your premise. The canceling the noise, structural analysis, contextual analysis, and the logic. And once you have fully applied all these 4 rules or steps or strategies, then you can use this information to come up with your conclusion, which is basically your guess for the blanks, right? So what have I written over here in the left side? So it's kind of like more like a deductive argument in which there's like a premise 1, which is like much more general. There's a premise 2, which is much more specific. And then there's a conclusion, which is even more specific. So how is this even related to this one? Don't worry. When we will solve questions, everything is going to make sense. So we need to actually look into these 4 different methods and kind of like understand how these 4 methods are kind of like interlinked with one another in order to decipher the text and get the premise, get the evidence, and finally jump to the conclusion, which is going to be our guess. So let's just dive into this. So let's start with the most easiest one, which is basically canceling the noise. So canceling the noise, again, it's mostly about the independent clauses and the fact that they have subjects and they have verbs. And this is basically the main idea, and the rest is just basically the detail. So if we look into this example, it says, my friend who lives across the street helped me with my assignment, which was assigned to us by Professor James, who is famous for giving laborious tasks to his students. Now, there is a lot of unwanted noise that you can cancel here, but before canceling, let's see what is really going on. So my friend is basically the subject here. Who lives across the street is just a relative clause, which is kind of like an adjectival in nature, which is giving information about the friend. Helped me, this is basically the verb. Me can be an object with my assignment. And then again, which, starting from which all the way to James, is again another relative clause, which is just giving me information about the assignment. And starting from who all the way to students, this is another relative clause, which is giving me information about Professor James, who is famous for giving laborious tasks, blah, blah, blah. However, if you cancel the noise, let's use black here. If you cancel the noise, all of this is just extra information, extra information, extra information, and yes, again, extra information. Yeah. In reality, all what you're dealing with is the main idea here, and the main idea is that your friend, my friend, basically helped me. That is all it. And the rest of that is just extra information, which you can actually focus on if the question demands or if you're not able to come up with your guess. However, initially, what you should be focusing on is basically you should be focusing on the major idea, especially in the reading comprehensions. So this is like a quick overview of what the canceling the noise looks like. Let's kind of like jump to the structural analysis. Probably I should have drawn a line here so that you guys don't confuse. Anyway, so a structural analysis again is your ability to understand that how words kind of like work in order, the essay ability. So let me give you an example. Let's say I say he kicked the ball with power, or I can also say passionately, okay? Passionately, something to this effect. Well, you need to understand that this is basically an adverb. And the adverbs have a lot of freedom when it comes to the placement in the sentence. I can say passionately he kicked the ball. I can also say he kicked the ball passionately. I can also say he passionately kicked the ball. All of these different arrangements is gonna make sense. However, when you look at it here, he is a smart man. Now, smart is basically an adjective, which is giving me information about the object, which is basically the man. I cannot say he is a man smart, or I cannot say smart he is a man. So this is kind of like an overview of how words appear in order to make sense. And if you kind of like disturb the order, then none of things are gonna make sense. The last one is, no, the second last one is the contextual analysis. The contextual analysis is much more about the semantics and the meaning. And I think the best way to actually understand that is by actually looking into an example. So here it goes. Simon enjoys being a schadenfreude. Let's say you have no clue what this word means. I have to keep on looking. His YouTube channel is about brutal pranks. So this guy is a prankster, and not just any prankster. His pranks are brutal. Okay. Let's see if we have more information. He enjoys teasing people. Okay, so he loves teasing people and love to see others in misery. So now I think I have a lot of information to kind of like guess, kind of like a educated guess for this word. So if this Simon dude is about pranks which are brutal in nature, he loves teasing others and watching them in misery, what can I say about the word schadenfreude? So a schadenfreude basically means that someone who loves seeing other people in, misery and pain, and he enjoys seeing the misery of others, blah, 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 this kind of effect. So I was able to understand the meaning of this word right here just by actually focus on the semantics, the meaning of other words and phrases. So finally, I'm just gonna quickly give you an overlook of what is the logic, the last part. So the way logic basically works is, let's say this is a sign of, okay, I say all humans are mortals. So humans is kind of like a subset of mortals, and I'm kind of like using this Venn diagram. And I say Simon is a human, therefore Simon must be mortal, okay? So this kind of like makes sense because I'm moving from a general overall picture to a more specific sample, and then I'm moving within, while keeping in that sample, I'm moving from from H to S, which is basically humans and Simon. So this is how deduction basically works. It moves from the general to specific to more specific. However, when you are talking about induction, things kind of like shift a little bit. So let's say I'm like, Simon is a handsome dude, and since Simon's is from probably Maldives or probably from Malaysia, therefore all men of Maldives are handsome. Now, does this really make sense? So the problem with induction is that it is only considering probability. There is no certainty. So the main problem is the sample cannot be actually equal to the overall population. So Simon is just one man, and the fact that he's handsome, okay? And just because he's from Maldives, I cannot say that all men in Maldives or probably in Malaysia are handsome. This wouldn't make sense. Maybe there are a lot of people who are just quite average, this kind of thing. So this is like a quick overview of what the logic is. So if before I actually dive into all of this stuff, there are few things that I expect you to know. Uh, I can quickly go through the verb part, the fact that people were facing difficulty in identifying the verb. However, when it comes to the inductive clauses, there's like a huge list that I expect you to know. And you can actually type them on, YouTube, on Khan Academy. So I believe there is this guy named as David. He is an awesome guy. He's an awesome teacher. He has described all of these things in quite depth, giving multiple examples. So I really think that you need to check it out. And if you don't really want to type each and every single name, like grammar lesson sentences, type of sentences, and all the other stuff, you can probably check out my Discord. I have made a separate channel in which I have shared the complete list in order, so you don't have to, worry about it and find it and type it on Google. However, what are the things that I expect you to know when it comes to independent clauses or applying probably CTN? You should know what a sentence is. You should know what a types of sentences, different types like simple sentence, a complex sentence, compound sentence. And if I move in further, you should know what a phrase is, what you should know a clause is. You should know different types of phrases and their different nature. You should know different type of clauses like relative clause, independent clause, dependent clause, that kind of thing. You should be able to know how different independent clauses are joined together. For that, you need to know coordinating conjunctions in which two equally important ideas are joined. And you should be able to differentiate coordinating conjunctions with subordinating conjunctions in which one weak idea or an extra idea, redundant idea, or extra explanation is joined to a more major idea, or in simple words, I could say, in a dependent clause is connected to an independent clause. And you should know a little bit about punctuation. So I think the only thing which is left now is that the confusion that people were facing while locating the verbs, because verbs play an important role in actually identifying the point. So there's a thing called known as infinitive, and it has this kind of like form. You have a to, and then you have a verb. The problem is that a majority of my students in class were confused about these, and they were, highlighting infinitives as verbs, and they were getting the point wrong. So I think this is really important to highlight how verbs are different from infinitives. So infinitives is like a to plus verb form, and the way they are different is infinitives are used as subjects or they are used as objects. And let's see how they roll. So if I say to go or not to go for the vacation is confusing. So is like the main verb here. Confusing is probably a state, almost like an object. And to go or not to go is basically the complete subject. Now, on the surface, this go might seem like a verb, where in reality, when you talk about the function, it is acting like a subject. Therefore, it is an infinitive. I can also make it as an object. I can say I like to read. So to read is the object over here, even though on the surface it might seem like a verb, read. However, to read is basically being used here as an object, and therefore it is not a verb. An actual verb is basically like. There's another thing known as gerunds, in which we have a verb with an ing form. Some people were also confused about this, so I thought I maybe should highlight it. So if I say smoking is something that I dislike. Now, smoking on the surface might seem like a verb. However, over here, it is used as a subject. And I can also shift a gerund on to the opposite side, make it an object. I can say I like running. So you guys get the idea here. So you should be able to kind of like know this, basic grammar rules and the fact infinitives and gerunds and all this type of stuff. If you really want to practically apply this method onto the text and get the premise and come up with a solid arguments for your conclusion. So now that you have actually understood what is the canceling the noise, what is structural analysis, what is contextual analysis, what is logic, let's try to apply that to this ETS question and see how things roll. But before I actually accurately apply to this question, I'm going to pretend to be like a naive test taker. And you guys must be wondering, why am I doing that? First of all, I'm going to pretend to be a naive test taker, then I'm going to pretend to be an experienced one. The reason why I'm basically doing is that, first of all, I want to demonstrate that how ETS manipulates your thinking ability, and how these texts and how these questions are so beautifully designed, to the point that you will start appreciating that how much work these ETS professionals actually put in designing these questions, and why these questions are basically matchless, totally matchless when it comes to in the GRE prep market. You will also kind of like see how ETS people use trap answers, that kind of thing. So let's say I'm just going to pretend to be a naive test taker. Let's say, this is like the next symbol. I'm just going to click that and pretend to be a naive test taker after, and you'll see my approach. You will see why my thinking method was flawed, and later on I'm just going to correct that. So here goes nothing. Oh, drats. Another 3 blanker? Oh man, I hate reading. Well, sometimes a man has got to do what a man has got to do. So here goes nothing. Okay. The most striking thing about the politician is how often his politics have been dash rather than ideological. So I'm seeing a rather, which is kind of like a negative word, and ideological seems a bit positive, government for the people, by the people, to the people. So probably there's some negative word over here, and probably what should be the opposite of ideology, probably dictatorship, or probably something to the effect of, self-centered, or probably selfish, something like that. So if I move down here, quixotic doesn't seem to make sense. Self-righteous, okay, maybe strategic. No, that's not even close to my guess. Cancel this out. This seems pretty good. Okay, moving on. As he adapts his political positions at any particular moment to the political realities that constrain him. So probably he's just, saying yes, or he's adapting to things that constrain him. Okay, moving on. He does not, however. Okay, so probably I'm predicting that if he's saying yes before, after the however, which is a negative word, probably he is gonna say no or ignore. Oops, probably should write. Yeah, ignore these political principles, something to this effect. He does not, however, or probably, so if he's ignoring and there's a not, probably I have to say the opposite, right, in order to make sense. So he does not, however, piously accept something to this effect, accept political principles only to betray them in practice. I don't even know what that means, and since I hate reading, I'm just gonna ignore that. So, okay, coming back to the answer choices, follow, yeah, looks pretty good. I'm gonna give it a heart. Flout, no, that's the opposite I'm looking for. Brandish, what the hell brandish means? And it doesn't even make sense. I'm gonna go for follow. Okay, moving on. Rather, he attempts in subtle ways to balance his political self-interest with probably other people interest, others interest, or probably something good, I don't know. Viewing himself as, who cares about reading all of this? Since I hate reading and I already have a guess for my blank, who cares about that, right? Okay, profound cynic, is it others' interest or something positive? Doesn't seem like it, cancel it out. Deeply felt moral code, looks like positive, I'm gonna keep it. Thoroughgoing pragmatism, ooh, this is also positive. Oh shit. What do I do now? I have 2 positive ideas. I'm running out of time. Let's choose I. So answer should be B, F, and I. Okay. Stop. Going back to reality. So guys, this is how basically an amateurs attempt the questions. And first of all, even though there was a thought process, I'm going to actually describe why each and every single initial guess was wrong, and the fact that why it was wrong. Like over here, it was like something to the opposite of ideology, like dictatorship, selfishness, self-centered, something to this effect. Over here, my guess was like accept, right? Accept. And over here, it was like something to the effect of others' interest. And even though there was some thinking involved, however, I ignored a lot of details which eventually made me guess the wrong answers. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to quickly rub this stuff off. I'm going to keep these guesses just so that you guys can get a feel of how ETS loves playing with your thought process and how you need to think very strategically in order to tackle these down. So it says right over here, the most striking thing about the politician. Okay, so there is the most striking thing is going to be the subject, and about is going to be the verb. The most striking thing about the politician is how often his politics have been dash rather than dash. So if I'm only using my structural analysis ability, I do know that I'm talking about a state because thing is something. So it's gonna be some adjective over here, right? Just using my essay ability rather than ideological. Okay, so now I need to shift on kind of like semantics because I do know the meaning of ideology. It's like government for the people, by the people, to the people. So this initial guess might be something to opposite of ideology, something like to dictatorship, self-centered. However, if I am using all of the passage correctly and I'm actually kind of like going through it thoroughly, I would quickly realize over here I see a comma, okay, and I know that these two ideas needs to be, closely related to another. Again, my essay ability, structural analysis ability. Here it says he adapts his political position at any particular moment to the political realities that constrain him. So this guy is basically adapting. Again, this is the subject, this is the verb. So this guy is adapting positions that constrain him. So he's basically saying yes to those positions which are kind of like opposing him. So if here's the question. So if he's saying yes to the ideologies that are opposing him, can dictatorship or self-centered would make sense that his politics are related to selfishness and dictatorship? That wouldn't make sense. Why? Because he is accepting the resistance. He is accepting the positions that kind of like go against him. So already I have proved my initial guess wrong. And the reason why I actually got this question wrong is because first of all, I was only relying on this small sample, only 2 words in philosophical language or critical reasoning language. I was using this small sample ideology and rather to come up with my guess. And I was not considering on the overall picture, which eventually made me realize that, hey, you know what? This guess does not make sense. So I'm going to keep on going. He does not, however, piously dash. Okay, let me just remove it just so that you guys don't get confused. Let me write it over here, except, just so that you guys can know that my initial guess was except. Okay. He does not, however, piously dash. Again, he is the subject over here. Does not, however, piously. Already I know, according to my essay ability, structural analysis ability, that this is going to be some form of verb. He does not, however, piously dash political principles. I need to rub this out. Okay. Only to betray them in practice. So this is kind of like a bit complicated sentence structures. I'm going to probably use my structural analysis ability to kind of like decipher this, and I've kind of like written over here. So in the original sentence, basically it is written in the form of IC and then a DC. However, I've just flipped the order just to make it easy for you guys. I've written the DC first, which is basically only to betray them in practice, only to betray political principles in practice. He does not piously dash them. This is a dependent clause. How can I tell? Basically, it's almost like, because of this subordinating conjunction, only to betray political principles in practice. He does not piously dash them. This is going to be an independent clause. So I have kind of like used my structural analysis ability over here to kind of like decipher that. Let's kind of like play with it just so that you guys can know what is the ETS really doing here. So let me just, rub this part and rub this part and see how the logic of this sentence really works. So I'm like, okay, only to betray, now betray basically means to show, only to show political principles in practice, he dashed them. So this tells me that, now I'm using contextual analysis. So this tells me that there's like a fake show, a fake show of these political principles, right? And the fact that he has this fake show of political principles and he just wants to give a fake show, he's probably accepting them. He's probably accepting them. This seems to work over here. However, the second I move does not, now my logic does not seem to work. So if he's just trying to show these, create a fake show of political principles, how can he accept them with does not in the sentence? This doesn't really make sense. So if you come back up here, my initial guess was accept, just because I was not reading strategically and not using a sentence, a structural analysis to the best of its ability. Therefore, my initial guess is also wrong. And therefore, my answer follow is also wrong. So, okay, so if I want to insert does not in the sentence, what I have to do is kind of like, probably bring the opposite. I can say he does not reject them. He does not reject them. And this seems to work over here. And if I come back to the answer choices, I see flout, which is not exactly reject. Flout basically means an open disregard to the rules, to the point of shamelessness, to the point of, being disrespectful. So if I see flout, this might work. Okay, this might seem to work and it might seem like a correct answer. However, if you again consider this word piously, you will notice, then can you piously flout a word which shows disregard for rules and consideration of authority, and to the point of being shameless, and to the point of being, a bold? With piously, this word does not simply add up. So again, my second guess was also wrong. Now the question is, how on earth Brandish will seem to work? So if I come back here to the passage and a lot of stuff that I kind of like ignored, I have to say, okay, rather, so he is not doing something, rather what he is doing, let's see. Rather, he attempts in subtle ways to balance his political self-interest with, I don't know, something to the effect of selflessness, or probably some, other positive ideas, which works pretty well. His political, rather he attempts in a subtle ways to balance his political self-interest with selflessness, viewing himself as an instrument of some unchanging higher purpose. So if you come back here, he is not doing something, but what is he doing? He's trying to balance things out. He's trying to come up with a position in which he's trying to prove that he is some unchanging dude whose, standards are not changing with the passage of time. So what can I basically say about this blank? Well, I can simply use the opposite. So if the evidence over here is balanced, I could say probably over here there is some type of imbalance, or probably there is some type of changing which is going on, something to this effect. So if I look at the answer choices, brandish, well, brandish have two connotations. If you're like probably brandishing a baseball bat towards or probably in front of a burglar who's probably, broke into your house or something. You're probably trying to scare him away. You're kind of like waving that bat. However, brandish also means like a wave and a to and fro movement, which is kind of like goes with our guess to the fact that he is changing like to and fro, or there's some type of imbalance. And if I come to my last guess, okay, my last guess, he says he is trying to balance two different things, self-interest with a dash. So in order to come down here, I do know that there needs to be something positive, right? Because self-interest has kind of like a negative connotation. Profound, a cynic, basically this is a negative idea, so I'm going to cancel this out. Now the question is, deeply felt moral code is positive, thoroughgoing pragmatism is positive. Now the question is, how can I actually relate and come up with a better guess? So since I'm using contrasting ideas, let's try to come up with a contrasting idea of morality. So the contrasting idea of morality is going to be something to the effect of immoral, right? Immoral or immorality. Or what is going to be the opposite or a contrasting idea of pragmatism is going to be something to a fact of, impractical. Impractical. Or something like quixotic, right? I can just use this GRE word, quixotic. Now the question is, which contrasting idea aligns with self-interest or probably selfishness? So if someone is selfish, is this a moral issue or is this a practical issue? If someone is selfish and he considers only his own desires and disregard others, this is a problem of morality rather than practicalness, right? Because you can be practical. For example, let's say you're selling burgers and you're just giving free, fries as a side dish, just to make your customers loyal and just to, attract more customers, even though you doing or something for your self-interest, but it can be practical. However, when you're just doing things solely on your self-interest, it is a moral issue. So deeply felt moral code is a much more a stronger contrasting idea than thoroughgoing pragmatism. So now that we are done with our final two blank guesses, which is Brandish, something which is changing, moving to and fro, and the last one is deeply felt moral code. Now I think we are in a much better position to actually go to the first blank and come up with a guess. So if this guy is basically adapting, the positions that are opposing him while keeping his self-interest, can I say that he is quixotic, that he's foolishly impractical? No, I'm going to say that this guy's pretty smart, and this guy knows how to deal stuff, how to deal with different ideas. So quixotic doesn't make sense. My initial guess, self-righteous, was definitely wrong. Why? Because he was adapting right over here. He was adapting the positions that constrained him, that were opposite to him. So that doesn't work. The only thing which seems to make sense is strategic, that he was a damn good thinker. He was really into, tackling these different ideas and, coming up with a solid plan, blah, blah, blah. So, guys, I think we're pretty much done over here. And I think you have got the point that how structural analysis, contextual analysis, canceling the noise method, and using a sound logic can be used to decipher the text and come up with your premise in order to come up with a solid argument for your conclusion, for your guess. And the reason I was able to come up with a solid argument against every single one of these, answer choices is because I use this method in which basically I'm kind of like combining all these 4 strategies into one and then trying to come up with a conclusion. So the takeaway, guys, over here is that I needed you to really focus on a neat process so that you can actually, get a sense of how these ETS passages are constructed and what you need to do in order to decipher them strategically. Okay, guys, this is ABD signing out, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.